Hey everybody, Hamster Sales here with another Diablo 3 skill calculator video. This time I am doing a second build for the Demon Hunter. My previous one was kind of a ranged build that focused on evasiveness and damage with your ranged attack, that kind of thing. This time I went for kind of a crazier build. It almost uses, well, really uses no ranged attacks with the normal weapon for a Demon Hunter, which is a crossbow, a bow, or hand crossbow of some kind. I'm primarily focusing on her bombs and traps and companions that she can summon. Also, the Phantom Knives ability is incorporated. And we start off with the basic grenades attack. This is really going to keep in with this kind of, relatively crazy theme where you're not going to be using bow or crossbow as a main hand weapon. This is going to be my primary attack, just tossing out grenades. You can see that it does weapon damage, so something that I think might work very well with this build, since I don't really intend to use a bow at all, is to hold a giant two-handed weapon that has a high base damage to increase the ability of some of my skills like this that are based on weapon damage. Phantom Knives is similarly built upon weapon damage, so I think running around with a giant two-hander might maximize the damage of some of these skills that don't really rely on shooting a bow of some kind. The rune I chose for this grenade attack is the Stun Grenade rune, the Alabaster rune, which has a chance to stun all my enemies, which I figured would be extremely useful. As my main attack, I'm going to be throwing it out all the time, doing a good amount of damage, but also stunning my enemies and keeping them off guard. This is also a hatred generator. The Demon Hunter has two resources, of course, hatred and discipline. So I'll be getting tons and tons of hatred using this as my main attack. There is no cooldown on it that I can see, so I should be able to spam bombs and stun my enemies at the same time, which sounds like a ton of fun to me. We've also got the Spike Trap as my second hatred generator. In keeping with the no bow theme, Spike Trap is going to be doing tons and tons of damage. There's no cooldown on it. It does take a second to trigger, so you're going to have to place it relatively strategically in the path of where your enemies are going to be, not where they are at the exact same time. But this thing just pretty much explodes and does damage to all enemies within 8 yards. And the rune I chose for that is the ability to spam out 7 traps at a time, which I figure would be extremely useful since I'm using it as kind of a secondary main attack that also generates hatred for me, which is very cool, I think. Keeps the maximum up to 7. Some of these runes are pretty cool, but this seemed like the primary choice for me since it's going to be kind of a secondary main attack. Should be very useful, the ability to throw out 7 area of effect traps with no cooldown that I can see, and generate some resources in addition. Seems very, very cool. I've got to have some way to spend some of that hatred. Actually, I don't think I'll be spending too much hatred at all with this build, but one of the very powerful abilities that I can use for that is Phantom Knives. Much like the Warden ability in Warcraft 3 or the Rogue ability from World of Warcraft, the Demon Hunter has Phantom Knives, just a standard area of effect attack. She's going to spin around and throw all kinds of daggers everywhere, killing lots of enemies in a big area of effect. And this is going to be one of my big damage dealers in general, as well as an area of effect damage dealer, so I decided to rune it just for maximum damage and increase the range. So the Crimson Runestone is sometimes fairly vanilla. This time it does give an increased range radius, so there's going to be some additional spell effects. The daggers, I'm sure, will travel farther on screen graphically when you have this rune. So that's pretty cool. There are some nice choices otherwise too, but since I really need this to do lots of damage in area of effect, I wanted to rune it that way. Second hatred spender I got was Chakram. Again, I don't really want to shoot from range too much with this build. Normally you throw out the giant Chakram you may have seen in the gameplay videos, and it kind of swirls along a path and goes forward like a fairly basic range attack that does some good area of effect damage. I have instead chosen to rune it so that the Chakram will just spin around myself and do lots of damage as I walk around. I will be keeping enemies stunned with my grenades, so I can just kind of walk around them and do tons of damage with my Chakram and my Phantom Knives. So that seemed like a good way to spend my hatred in addition to Phantom Knives there. There's some cool choices here, of course, too, but most of them centered around throwing the Chakram out as a ranged attack, which I kind of wanted to stay away from in this build. I kind of don't want the Demon Hunter doing any hard work with ranged attacks. Just want her to run around, throw knives in a circle, throw bombs, throw traps. And in keeping with not doing a lot of work, I chose the Companion skill, one of the Demon Hunter's, well, I believe the Demon Hunter's only summon ability. It normally summons a Raven, but with your rune choices you get to choose the type of summon you get I went for the big beefy boar that attacks in a bit of an area of effect, has a kind of a cleaving attack. There's some pretty cool choices there. You can see ferret, spider, bat, and wolf in addition to the boar. But I've got kind of a big area of effect thing going on, so I just wanted to continue that. Plus the boar, I'm sure, has pretty good hit points, being a big beefy boar, so that will hopefully pan out. So I can try this build out when I actually get my hands on the game. Last skill I chose was Sentry. I chose this last time around. It's a really cool skill, and I ruined it the same way. I'm going to be running around a bit in melee, so I had the Sentry out, and I've got this tether that I create with the Crimson Runestone that has kind of a beam, I imagine, between myself and the Sentry that you try to line up with the enemies and do tons of damage. And again, area of effect damage can hit multiple enemies, and just big damage, all without having to shoot your regular weapon, a crossbow or a bow. It seemed like a very cool concept to me, all these skills kind of fitting together. No real synergy involved, I don't think, and I don't really have too many ways to spend hatred, which is kind of a shame. But I did carry that over into the passive skills, so let's take a look at that. Hot Pursuit, whenever I'm at full hatred, my movement speed is increased. Again, I really don't have too many ways to spend hatred. Phantom Knives is on a cooldown, and I'm not going to be casting Chakram too often because it's going to circle around me for 40 seconds. So I'm going to be at full hatred most of the time, so why not gain a passive speed increase? I've also got the Custom Engineering, seemed like a no-brainer. The duration of my Sentry is going to be increased by 100%, as well as that of Spike Trap, so if the enemies don't immediately trigger Spike Trap, it will be around for longer. Seemed pretty cool. Not using Caltrops or Marked for Death, unfortunately, but I do get a nice duration increase out of 2 of my other skills. And my last passive ability is Sharpshooter. There really was a kind of a lack of passive skills that kind of lined up with this type of build where I really don't intend to shoot a bow or crossbow at all. So I just chose the passive critical chance that should build up over time, and I hope is affected by these skills. Things like Phantom Knives, Grenades, Chakram, I hope those can all crit. So that should synergize pretty well. And otherwise, I think I've come up with a pretty interesting build here. It's pretty cool that Blizzard is still supporting the crazy builds that you used to be able to come up with in Diablo 2, like a melee necromancer and things like that. They of course intended the Demon Hunter to shoot the bow, but they have given her a cool suite of abilities where she really doesn't have to do that at all. And I think you've got the chance here to run around with a two-handed weapon, as a lot of these abilities, their base damage is determined by your weapon, whatever you're holding. So if you have a giant two-handed axe, that's probably the best way to increase the percentage of weapon damage you can see in a lot of these skills. So thanks so much for listening. Please tell me what you thought of this build and the skill calculator in general. Tell me if you've been playing around with builds yourself. I think it's a lot of fun, something to occupy ourselves before Diablo 3 comes out or we get our hands on the beta. And thanks once again for listening.